Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, die-in time is here. That's right, we're talking about Basic Instinct on Kill by Kill After Dark. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from the streets of San Francisco. This is the Kill by Kill podcast After Dark, where we talk about an erotic thriller in the order in which people die, in the hopes that the dumbest police detective you ever met in your life, his untimely end, is just the beginning of the jokes he might make at his expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust to deposit $50K in a safety deposit box just to make me look guilty. It's a blanket thing. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
You know, usually I make some sort of reference to a line of dialogue, you know, as my introduction. But every line of dialogue in this movie is so disgusting and so filthy and so perverted that I would accidentally get canceled for inadvertently sexually harassing you.
Yes, I believe that would be true. And it is hard on the ears, but we will examine that script in depth, because how the fuck did this happen? Who decided to pay $3 million United States dollars in 1991 because they just had to get these words and ideas on the big screen?
They had to get John Goodman to use the phrase magna cum laude pussy.
I believe you're referring to acting legend George Zizina.
Oh, okay, right. But the other,
I wish
the
it was John Goodman. Guy.
Right. But John Goodman's definitely another like meant to be sexy crime thriller. I can't remember which one it was off the top of my head.
Not to mention, the entire time I'm watching this movie, I'm like, he ripped off this stupid shit for Jade so hard, Gina.
Oh yeah, totally.
It's just plot point by plot point. We'll get to it. Now, I don't want to scare you any more than I already have, Gina, but we are not alone. That's right. We have special guests. Now, you may know them as the hosts of How to Be a Terrible Daughter, a comedy podcast about narcissistic abuse. You put those two things together. They do each and every week. The ones, the onlys, Megan and Elizabeth. How are you both doing today?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for having us here.
Pretty good.
So happy to have you both on board for this. It's divine providence that you came into our digital lives before we talk about a movie that is so specifically about various forms of narcissism. If I believed in a heavenly being, I would assume that he had steered you all in our direction.
It is. It's like 31 flavors of narcissism in this movie.
Oh my God.
Now, usually on the show, we like to ask people, and I'll start with Gina, when the first time they watched Basic Instinct was. Gina, where were you?
You know what? I did not see this in the theater because you could not escape it. I do recall it was released around the same time as Wayne's World, which I thought was, which I did see in the theater.
What a double feature that might have been for some lucky lad and ladess.
Really, really tight. I was only like barely 20, I think, when this came out.
Right.
And I was in I'm not going to go see this because people, because it's popular and people are talking about it. And this was like huge news when it came out because it was a mainstream movie with incredibly supposedly graphic sex scenes, and there was the whole typical rumors, maybe they weren't actually just pretending to have sex in it, and
Right.
like it was like, no, I'm not gonna bother. So, and then I ended up watching it like on cable, probably maybe 5 or 6 years later. I'm like, was unimpressed. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, woman on, reverse cowgirl. That's crazy. I can't believe we're showing this in mainstream movie.
You had not had an HBO subscription yet, so you were unused to such things being portrayed on the small screen.
Exactly. And also by that time, I knew that they actually strongly disliked each other in real life. And to me, that kind of colored the whole thing for me and made an already repugnant movie that much more repugnant. So
Sure.
yeah, I would say unimpressed would be my general opinion about the entire thing.
Megan, how about you? Did you catch us in theaters? Did you see it on home video? Where were you?
Oh, yes. I saw it in theaters. I believe it was one of the two big theaters that face each other in Westwood Village. It's the Fox, and then I can't remember the other one. Yes, absolutely, on the big screen. I was very excited to see this movie.
And Elizabeth, how about you?
I don't remember if I saw it first in the theater or on video, but I saw it 1,000 times. And I mean, I must have seen it as soon as I possibly could. Either way, I was in the middle of college and there was nothing like it. And I just wanted to see it so bad, so bad.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about its sort of place and timing in the world. I saw it in New Jersey while I was serving a mission for the Mormon Church. So,
Oh, God.
And did not tell a soul,
That
presumably.
is quite a juxtaposition.
it
that
is.
Makes me really happy.
I was not a good missionary. And I mean that in multiple ways. I just sucked at it and I didn't care for it personally. And so I tried every excuse to avoid it. And that usually meant reading a lot of books and listening to hip hop music from the radio stations in New York City. But when I could convince a companion to break the rules with me and go see a movie, we did. And this was one of those movies we fucking went and saw. We didn't care. And I laughed the entire way through the movie. I find this unintentionally hilarious. I think it is delightful in not a wow, look at the skill on display, in its audaciousness, in its complex, simplistic stupidity. It's a lot of things all at once. I think it is a combination of elements that make Basic Instinct unique. And the first one I'm going to talk about is writer and premier self-mythologizer Joe Eszterhas, who's a giant Hungarian bear man who would type anything on paper to make money. Just anything he could possibly think of, anything he observed, anything he kind of observed, he would just use his big fingers and sausage smash a typewriter into word salad. And he's got an interesting backstory in that he was born in the closing years of World War II. He spends his first years on Earth in a refugee camp on the Allied side. And his family immigrates to the U.S. He grew up in Cleveland. And he has some of the most confusing politics of anyone I have ever encountered on Earth. For a guy who refused to reconcile with his father after learning that he had written propaganda for Nazi-affiliated forces, he is currently a big fan of Nazi aficionado Viktor Orban. So he is fucking weird. He's just an odd goddamn ball. But get used to this, because he has no clue about what side of any issue he is on going forward. I will tell you things that he did in relation to this movie that will make you go, I don't think he knows or understands what he wrote. And that is true. That is my supposition. I don't think he understands Basic Instinct, and all the words you hear in the movie are his.
Yeah.
Well, that makes two of us.
I think he's the most interesting character because
It's quite possible.
I have something to say when we get to this about his reasons for writing this and all of his oeuvre, right? Sort of have some themes going through it.
He does.
But yeah, he's a interesting guy.
You know, started out a journalist and then transitions into script writing. He's one of those weird idea machine kind of guys. Like, I've never heard someone praise him for great dialogue or compelling stories, but he is like, he'll say things and people go, well, that'll make a movie. And then he writes a script and they're like, I don't know if this makes a movie. Someone rewrite it. For example, his first screenplay, FIST or Fist, was completely rewritten by Sylvester Stallone. They saw his script and said, you know who will fix this? Sylvester Stallone.
Well, he did write Rocky, so.
And his next notable splash comes when he rewrites the script for Flashdance. You know, a movie we all remember for its sparkling dialogue. And then he becomes the highest paid scriptwriter in Hollywood for a film called Big Shots. Have any of you ever heard of Big Shots
Is that
before?
the one where like the two little kids like find some money?
Yes. It is. All I remember of this movie is its VHS box of two kids in giant fedora hats and sunglasses standing in front of a Mercedes.
I don't even think they were even like particularly famous child actors. That's exactly what I remember is the fedoras and the sunglasses.
But he becomes the highest paid screenwriter in Hollywood due to this movie, where a white kid runs away to Chicago's South Side and has an adventure in the hood. And it's fucking terrible. He was paid $1.5 million for it, and the movie's budget was 10, and it earned 3, which I would say is 2.5 too much.
And they let him make more movies after that. That's the impressive thing.
Yeah, did he not write Jagged Edge, I think?
That is the next thing I think he's most known for, because I would say Jagged Edge, while not the greatest of the erotic legal thrillers,
it's competent. It's competent. I
It is
will say
competent.
that. And it also resulted in one of my favorite Harvey Birdman episodes.
Oh, Gene Radcliffe. Perfect. But Jagged Edge is competent. It's well acted. It's well directed. It looks good. It's a perfectly great TNT rainy Sunday afternoon movie. And so Eszterhas, while he's not always making the most amount of money, he's always in the mix for whatever fucking reason. And then Shane Black took his title of most money paid for a screenplay with The Last Boy Scout. Trivia note, it was originally entitled Die Hard, but the producers took that title and said, "We'll pay you back later." And they did when they made him the highest paid screenplay writer in Hollywood for The Last Boy Scout. And so Joe Eszterhas got up in his big bear man feelings and gender swaps basically Jagged Edge into Basic Instinct in 13 days. And he sold this, what he claims to be a script not written on cocaine, for $3 million US.
Just reading, I'm on the quotes page on like the IMDb. I'm just like shaking my head. Like it's filth. It's
But
like every character just opens their mouth.
But it's also
just like,
incompetent filth. Like, my apologies when I have 3 women on this show and I have to say the words magna cum laude pussy. What the fuck does that mean? What does it mean?
Well, I use that in my day-to-day profession all the time.
Is that on your LinkedIn?
You've never heard a therapist say that in session?
No, but I also haven't heard a out of nowhere cowboy cop in San Francisco who is so reverential to his Cadillac. Is it ever explained why he shows up dressed in fucking cowboy gear?
The underground cowboy scene of San Francisco in 1992. You weren't aware? It's huge.
According to Joe fucking Eszterhas, this giant Hungarian bear man, Basic Instinct is genius. It's a travesty. It's a revolution. It's the destruction of cinema. It's his finest work. And it's a gay bashing dud. It really just depends on the hour and which way the wind is blowing.
He's not right or wrong about any of those things. Yes, but
the
also
one thing
no.
he really doesn't call it is dumb. And that is the one thing I truly believe it is. It is monumentally dumb.
I mean, much like Jade, which we have covered already.
Yes.
I believe that was our very first After Dark episode, which again
Truly one of the dumbest erotic
was
thrillers
one
of all
I
time.
believe was one of my brilliant ideas. Typical of a lot of erotic thrillers written by men. He hates female sexuality. It makes him deeply uncomfortable to have a woman who is in charge of her own sexuality.
Yes.
And so they must be made to pay in some way for that.
I think he's actually terrified of women, to be honest. Like, this to me just read like his unconscious fear of vagina dentata for 2 hours. Like, that's what it read to me. Like, women, independent women who have their own money, women who are queer, so they don't necessarily need men, are terrifying, and they're probably going to murder you, is what I read.
And they're constantly conspiring behind your back to do something terrible. And it's only through your wit and your gun that allows you to murder people can you survive such an onslaught.
And he doesn't even have wit. He just has the gun.
He's got a gun and a couple of nice sweaters. That's it.
Who wears a sweater to a nightclub?
Who wears a sweater to a nightclub? Thank you.
Well, here's the thing. There's one person who can wear a sweater to a nightclub, and that is the vampire from Fright Night.
Yes.
Jerry Dandridge can pull that off,
but
and that's
also,
about it.
Also because he is not alive.
Right.
And so he's, I mean, I haven't been to a nightclub in a long time, but I did used to go to nightclubs a lot. Those are very hot places.
Yeah.
And you do not want to be wearing cashmere in a nightclub.
You don't want to be donning wool in
he
that
should be
sort of
constantly mopping at his forehead, and not because he's watching two chicks grind up against each other.
Is that why everybody else in the scene was dancing and he was just sort of standing there swaying gently back and forth? Maybe he was too hot.
Exactly.
Here's the thing. I don't really like the idea or the reality of Michael Douglas dancing. That's not something I need to see. There's a reason why in a chorus line, you only hear that motherfucker. I don't want to see him, kicking it on stage. That is not something I need to see. I don't need to see his plie or first position.
You don't want to see him doing Fosse hands or anything?
No, I don't want to see his all that jazz or any of his jazz, quite frankly. But the person whose jazz, I think, makes Basic Instinct actually work, the person who is one half of the reason why anyone still talks about this movie, is Dutch filmmaker Paul Verhoeven. Here's a guy who had devoted himself to using film to push buttons and boundaries. His first full-length film, Turkish Delight, was like a cause celeb after it hit theaters in Europe. For the next decade, he makes a bunch of frank, sexually explicit, violent, complicated films overseas, and it really all changes for him when he makes one of the great anti-corporate films of all time, RoboCop. You remember RoboCop? He shot that one guy in the dick.
Is that the tagline from the movie? That part I don't remember.
One of my favorite photos of all time is at a fan convention. Someone wore a t-shirt to meet Peter Weller. And he obviously didn't see the t-shirt until she walked into frame and they took the picture. Because on the t-shirt, it says, remember that one time RoboCop shot that guy in the dick? And the look of genuine joy on his face as someone has recognized this moment and celebrated it and worn it on their chest is, I think, magic. When I need a shot of happiness, that's the photo I look at.
It's your puppies and kittens.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. And he follows that up with a film about how autocratic power will literally charge you for money to breathe. It's entitled Total Recall. And so he's a person who finds the most anti-capitalist ideas within a movie script and says, that's what I'm going to focus on. And over the course of the pre-production of this thing, Verhoeven reads Basic Instinct, and his first idea is to make the film bolder in its sexual politics instead of just things you casually look at to get a virtual thrill from. And Eszterhas is aghast. How dare you, he says. Someone wants to make, this Basic Instinct more exploitative. The nerve, he cries out loud into the wilderness. Verhoeven wants to put in a scene in which Catherine Trammell actually has sex with a woman. How dare, Eszterhas says. This is for my titillation, not for exploration. And Eszterhas is a man who would talk to a reporter about what he had for breakfast. And so he does that constantly during the course of making this movie and claims that his work is being bastardized. Can you imagine bastardizing Basic Instinct.
He was upset that it was more exploitative and titillated. Like, what?
Yes. And almost as if someone's taking this child's view of bisexuality too far.
Well, I think it's the same guy who I think, like, when he also we buried the lead. He also worked with Paul Verhoeven on a little movie called Showgirls.
Yeah.
And also, like, really, you went out of pocket with how he described what Showgirls was and what it meant to him, and how it was a deeply personal film that he thought people would consider to be a religious experience. And I'm like, Joe, what in the hell are you talking about?
I would argue Verhoeven is the only filmmaker to truly realize Eszterhas's vision, because he's the one who actually reads the script and says, don't change anything. This is what we're going to film. And he does it. And then Joe Eszterhas is like up in arms. How dare you do these things? These things I wrote down with my giant sausage fingers with a typewriter.
How dare you make the movie I envisioned?
They do bring in a script doctor at one point, and they go through a bunch of different drafts, but it doesn't really get better. And so Verhoeven is like, all right, listen, we need to make this movie, otherwise we're going to start paying penalties. We're just going to make the script that Eszterhas turned in. And so Joe is baffled when he receives a copy of the film's working script, and not a word of his has been changed. And so you have one person who really understands what they're trying to do here, which is Verhoeven. And Joe Eszterhas, who inadvertently has given him the fuel to make it happen, but has no concept of the actual power of the movie.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely. And parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/pod. There's one thing that will forever change the way you sleep, and it's the softest 100% organic cotton bedding from Boll & Branch. You'll fall asleep faster, wrapped in the most luxurious comfort. You'll never sleep hot again with airy blankets, cloud-like duvets, and breathable sheets. You'll experience pure comfort on night one and feel your bedding get softer with every wash. Discover the difference with 15% off your first order at bollandbranch.com with code CUMULUS. Exclusions apply. See site for details.
And then you add another person who both understands the power he has, but doesn't understand Basic Instinct. And that is professional cad, Michael Douglas.
He was on a roll of just playing scumbags for like a while in this period.
Yes. Do I believe he's like a good guy? Not really. But do I believe he's been, at least at moments in his life, reasonably self-aware of himself and how he appears on screen? Yeah, I do. Like, he knew that his dad's chin and connections could only get him as far as getting on the TV police procedural. And he knew at one point that Jack Nicholson was a better fit for a play that he had purchased the film rights to and ended up winning an Oscar for producing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And he knew that his whole burnout hippie thing was losing juice in the late 70s and early 80s, and that he could show up on screen as an asshole that you could watch by the time he hits Romancing the Stone. So he understood this so well, he wrote it to an Oscar for Wall Street. And then just like a string of movies that make money, including Black Rain and ultimately Fatal Attraction. Douglas understands his asshole appeal, but he's under some sort of delusion while making this movie that the character he's playing is, in dick finger quotes, the hero.
Yeah.
Which his character is not.
Let's go over real quick what this hero does.
Yeah,
please. He has killed people.
Yeah.
He's a rapist.
Mm-hmm.
And, and he's, sleeps with a suspect several times.
Sleeps with a psychologist several times.
Yeah, but he is supposed to be the quote-unquote good guy in this movie. He's the one that the audience is rooting for.
Wait, what?
that is the mystifying thing here. I believe in his heart of hearts, Michael Douglas was under the delusion that Shooter is the hero, not the protagonist of this movie. He is the protagonist. He is not a hero, nor would anyone who watches it for half the film, I think, believe that to be true. I just don't quite get it. But that's where I think we really come into vogue with having two people who talk about narcissism weekly. What is going on with this fucking character? It is crazy town.
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the hallmarks of narcissists is they believe their own, it's delusions of grandeur is actually in the manual for how to diagnose them, right? They believe their own shtick. They believe they are the hero or the victim, depending on the circumstances, no matter what.
He believes both at various points in this movie. He's being prosecuted by internal affairs here. His psychiatrist is, up his butt and down his throat when he wants it to be in reverse. And he's terrible. He is, in my belief, the biggest killer in this movie. He has the highest body count of anyone in the film.
I'd question that though, because you've got Catherine's parents, you've got a couple of other people. So they may be tied.
Yeah, I mean, no, pretty much all of the characters, the leading characters have killed somebody at some point. Because you've got Roxy, who is Catherine's lover, that she just casually mentions, she killed her brothers when she was a kid.
Who amongst us hasn't slashed their brothers just to ribbons?
I just collect these murderous queer women. You know how it is.
It takes a village. Honestly, Gina, it takes a village.
I mean, on the one hand, you would say it's improbable that all of these like sociopathic narcissists are all in the same friend circle. But on the other hand, it's not, because they actually love each other until they hate each other. They do tend to collect each other. As improbable as it is, it also somehow makes sense.
Absolutely. I think that she, when she kind of sets Roxy and Nick together, I don't think that she's necessarily aware that she's going to lose Roxy. I think that she's just going to enjoy watching those two, narcissists or crazy people fight and just see, she'll just take whoever's left.
I do think there's an element to her character, and I definitely want to get into her more, that what she enjoys is the combustible nature of every single one of her relationships. She seems to attract and repel people who are driven and obsessed with her. And that's both a fuel, but it's also an explosive. In her mind, she can already tell that there's no way that Shooter can handle the idea that she's bisexual. Up until the point in which she and Roxy, grope one another in front of him, it's a concept to him, but it's not reality. And when it becomes reality, he has to absolutely leave the room. I mean, how could that happen? That's not the way I view life, and bad. I must reiterate, and this goes for Jade too, these people live in San Francisco.
Yes,
he said it.
He's in his 40s.
Yes.
And this is the first time that he's ever encountered like the concept of a bisexual woman. He's generally like you're supposed to one could think he's uncomfortable because it's turning him on, but no, he's like, oh, I can't handle this.
Like, how does he operate? How does he operate day to fucking day in San Francisco? And it's not like it's just gay sex on every fucking corner in San Francisco, but it's a reality. Like, this isn't science fiction. And when they kiss, he acts like they have strapped on jet boots and taken off for the fucking moon.
Also, he's a cop, so I find it very hard to believe that he has never encountered a queer person before.
Is it the fact that they kiss, or is it the fact that they kiss and it's not just a show for him.
That I think that is a big component of it. But that's where I feel like for the Eszterhas script version of this, it is about control, and it's about how this woman is upsetting the levers of control and doing things that she just wants to do. She doesn't fit into a stereotype. That's inherently evil. But for Verhoeven, it's, I choose to do this. This is my lover who I have sex with because I want to, because I'm attracted to them. And while I have feelings for them, it's not entirely we're a loving nuclear family couple. We just have sex with one another and talk about various people we may have offed.
Well, there's the whole opening scene when they first go to the Stinson house to meet Catherine, where she says, you know, I wasn't dating him. I was just fucking him. And they hammer it home. Like, you mean you weren't in love with him? You were just having sex with him?
She emphasizes the casual nature of their relationship so many times, and these grown men
are shocked.
They're like taken aback at this. And yeah, I can't help. You're absolutely right, Patrick. You cannot help comparing this to Jade, because Jade is essentially the same movie where, but instead of casual sex, it's anal sex.
Right. In San Francisco.
Right. That they are like absolutely appalled by the very idea of this.
It's so puerile. It's so childish. It's so fucking stupid. But it's also so stupid, it might be smart. It might be brilliant. No, it's just stupid. I think it's kind of both.
Do you think Verhoeven thought that this was actually smart, or did he know that it was so stupid, but that if he just played it straight, it would almost be funny?
I think Verhoeven thought, if I play this straight, and I do it with style, and I inject meaning and history onto it, with Hitchcock homage, because there's just no way to view this without thinking specifically of Vertigo. I mean, the soundtrack to this movie, the music is constantly referencing Vertigo. It is so heavily Vertigo. And then you have multiple blondes, and then you have a brunette who once was a blonde and transforms into a blonde again. It's this whole huge Vertigo riff. And then when you go to the psychiatrist's apartment, you can always see people opposite her in a different apartment building in its rear window. And it's all this Hitchcock riff. And he's kind of like, you know, it would be funny if I just made a Hitchcock movie that instead of constantly implying sex, it's just full of sex. And it fucking works on that basis. On that basis, it actually works.
My charitable reading of what Paul Verhoeven was trying to do was actually pointing out, look at these big tough cops clutching their hankies and pearls over the idea of a willingly promiscuous woman who, will just have sex with whoever she wants, and it doesn't mean anything, and she can just walk away with no problems. But I think the problem is a lot of the audience was just as shocked as the characters were. Whereas I think the idea is supposed to be, I don't know, it's ridiculous how these men are reacting to her.
It is ridiculous that Nick is the hottest detective in the dumbest fucking police department of all time. I mean, they are all giant swinging dicks without a brain cell between them. It is monumentally evident that he is the smartest idiot in the group. And I don't even believe that after a while, because he misses all the signs. He misses almost every clue. He is constantly being led by the nose by smarter women than he is to come to the conclusions that they want him to come to.
Again, with the whole Verhoeven versus Eszterhas, I think Eszterhas is shocked and appalled by his female character's behavior, whereas Verhoeven is not. And I think that's the clashing here. Like, you've got this now, of course, famous scene, in the police questioning scene where she shows up and she's not wearing underwear and she's very aware of the reaction that this is having on the men in the room. You've got Wayne Knight, like he's like practically like pulling on his collar like Rodney Dangerfield. Just
the only time he's ever been wetter was when he was facing off with a dinosaur in the rain.
He's just like, Wayne, you have never seen a nude woman come on before. I mean, good Lord. It's like, you know, she knows the effect she's having. Maybe some of you ought to have a little self-control and pull it together.
Half these cops supposed to have worked Vice as well.
Yeah,
like they really...
These are all seasoned cops who are like, none of these are young guys. You got to figure they've had like 20, 25 years on the force. And again, in San Francisco has probably dealt with some really weird shit at some point. But you've got, but here's my vagina. And you're like, what are we doing here? I got to go take a break. You know, you've dealt with child pornographers, presumably, rapists, serial killers, and the half-second flash of a naked vagina is giving you palpitations.
I mean, they are so fucking dumb that, honestly, in my personal opinion, Dirty Harry is a better cop than anyone who's in this movie. And that's saying something, because he's not that great a cop. He shoots all his problems too. But you have a whole host of them. They're all this fucking stupid. And when Verhoeven has the scene in which Catherine is being interrogated, the camera is absolutely still. I mean, it moves. There are close-ups, but everything is controlled. And then when you flip it and Nick is being interrogated and he does the, what are you going to do? Arrest me for smoking? And it's basically the same fucking scene. It's all handheld. It's all out of control. They all are in their feelings. They all can't help but pile on to one another. They all just want to solve their problems with fist penetrations into one another.
I was going to say, it feels like, you know, there's this narrative through the film of he meets this woman and, you know, loses his ability to loses control, right? Loses everything. He starts drinking, he starts smoking, he starts, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it's just it's so funny to watch these men just fall apart because there's a woman who is sure of herself and sexual in nature.
And I think that Verhoeven filmed that scene the way he did because I think he thinks it's funny the way they're reacting to her.
Yes.
But I think that the audience is like, oh yeah, I'd be sweating and pulling at my collar too. It's like, sure, I guess.
Well, if it's playing to Peoria, then yeah, you know.
Yeah, I think he's making a smart movie out of stupid material and just having a blast doing it. It's like, I can't believe I'm getting away with this shit. And the other part that really makes it work is Sharon Stone. If you don't have Sharon Stone in this role, I don't think this movie works half as well as it does. I mean, Paul Verhoeven is still going to direct the hell out of it, but you're not going to get Basic Instinct as what it could be without her absolutely knowing the exact right way to act every single scene she's in. She's in control consistently. Even when she's out of control, she's doing it for a specific purpose. This movie, she was sort of laughed at afterwards because she had that much power. Like, people lost their fucking minds over her portrayal in this movie. And she could barely keep a career together because nobody knew what to do with this woman who decides for herself for things. And nothing exposed the soft, stupid underbelly of Hollywood quite like Basic Instinct.
I just think I do enjoy her performance in this because I think that, you know, like Paul Verhoeven, she is aware that it's nonsense.
Yes.
And she can barely stop herself from looking at the camera and smirking. So yeah, no, her part is enjoyable. And I think that a role that could have easily been accused of being exploitative, she kept it from being that.
I think she rescues it by acting at the level that someone has to make any of this float. Paul's doing it behind the scenes and she's doing it on camera. It is a dance between those two. And I think Michael Douglas's sort of obliviousness to his exact role in the movie works to the film's favor of being a weird over-the-top comedy that it should be taken as. Now, that's not to say that you can just laugh uproariously at it and not walk away feeling a little sleazier about yourself, because there is a decidedly misogynistic air to this, not to mention the fact that the biphobia in it is run rampant, and it was protested in San Francisco during filming by GLAAD as for a very simple and knowing reason. Why does every villain have to be gay? And that's a question to ask. My counter to that, though, is Catherine the villain? I would argue Nick is the menace. He believes he's above the law. He believes he's answerable to no one. He doesn't need a cause. He doesn't need a permission. He certainly doesn't need permission to date rape somebody. And it's only Joe Eszterhas's belief that Catherine is driving him to do this stuff, when in reality, he's always been doing this stuff. The camera just wasn't on him before. In my mind, we've got a Freddy versus Jason situation, and I'm rooting for one of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think that, Eszterhas couldn't handle the possibility that people would actually be on Catherine's side. So even when it's revealed that she's not the killer that Nick is looking for, that cute little, maybe she is still a killer. Maybe she's going to kill him. And it's like, sure, I guess, but also I think it's, he wants it two ways in Nick's absolutely deplorable treatment of Beth, his, psychiatrist / lover / punching bag, that, in the end, she's crazy too. And actually the real killer. So, right. He's forgiven for his deplorable treatment of her.
But I also think Catherine is attracted to him because he's a disaster in the making.
It's the whole I can see darkness in you kind of thing.
I can see darkness in you, and I know that this relationship won't last. Well, you're going to end up dead sooner or later. Your luck cannot run that fucking long. And it's been the history of who she happens to have dated. They all sort of self-destruct at a certain point. They can't. She's already attracted to people who are out of control, and it's only a matter of time. They either regulate themselves and they maintain relationship, or they don't and they explode. And she's like, but it'll make a great book.
Well, yeah. I mean, she's a sociopath. So she likes people that are fun to manipulate. She likes people that if you manipulate them, you'll get a reaction,
But she's the sociopath I'm rooting for.
Oh, yeah. Well, pick your fighter here, right?
Because he needs to be taken off the fucking streets. I'm sorry. Neither Jason or Freddy are people that you root for. But one of them's got to get taken down a notch. And that's how I feel about this. I think she's righteous in this particular pursuit. She knows that he's a piece of shit. And she knows that he is not as smart as he thinks he is. She clocks him instantly. Half the things she says don't relate to herself. They just relate to him, and he cannot figure it out. When she's talking to him in the car and she's like, listen, even if I was lying, I could beat that lie detector test. You know all about that. And he's like, wait a second. Hold on. I did lie and get away with it in a lie detector test. She must have done the same thing. She's talking about you, cowboy. She's talking about you. You fucking idiot. I hate Nick so much.
Oh, he's horrible. He's horrible. Not, like I've never seen. Yeah, you're right. It is unclear what I think definitely Verhoeven and Eszterhas had very opposing ideas what the audience should think of Nick. Yeah. I think that Eszterhas is, he's a cop, ergo he's the good guy. Whereas Verhoeven is, at best, he's an anti-hero. Where he gets the job done, but in the most backwards, violent, horrible way possible.
Well, and he knows he's an archetype that he can use because a character like Nick had existed well before this and continuously when this movie comes out and even after. And that's a useful idiot for him to create this other movie about. I'd say 3/4 of the audience just took it at face value. And they were shocked and they were dismayed and they could not believe that a woman could control her own pathway and her own sexual behaviors.
I mean, when I say you could not escape this movie, it's because and then this was pre-internet because of the discourse.
Yes.
And what is bisexuality?
Oh God.
I think this I kid you not, I think this is around the time that Newsweek, put out that Meet the Bisexuals cover story. like it had just been invented in the 90s. Because
they were introducing themselves before the Rose Bowl.
Because nobody knew what to make of it. Nobody knew what to make of the concept of being sexually attracted to both men and women. And people are like, well, how is this possible? And it just is. And, there's not really much any greater meaning to it, but we're going to put a lot of greater meaning to it.
Yeah.
I think this movie probably added a lot to the lore that bisexual people were inherently promiscuous, right?
And also mentally ill, because they're all mentally ill. All of them.
It did not do any favors
for
the queer community, this movie.
And that's the complicated nature of it, because it is that thing that you can't mollify it by saying, well, Verhoeven is making fun of it, because that requires you to be aware it's making fun of it. And I don't think audiences were at all.
No, because
they understood there was an arch nature to it. Plenty of people understood the camp elements to it. But that's the thing about camp. You know it when you see it, but if you don't know what you're looking for, you can completely miss it.
I hate to be this person, but, I feel like what Verhoeven is trying to bring to it is a sort of European sensibility to sexuality, particularly how it's portrayed on the screen. And
are you lighting a cigarette while you're doing this? Do you have a beret on?
I have my beret. I'm going to snap my fingers. Let me put my philosophy book down. But because, you can't be pulling that shit on Americans. We weren't ready for bisexuals in 1992.
But I think that Eszterhas felt emboldened to a certain degree because he had pulled the wool over people's eyes with RoboCop, and he pulled the wool over people's eyes.
That was violence, Patrick. That wasn't sexuality.
Yeah. True. True.
RoboCop is a remarkably sexless movie. It is, however, extraordinarily violent.
And of course, Total Recall is more sexual to the point where my kid Ollie absolutely wanted to stop watching once the 3-breasted woman showed up. That was too much. He could not handle it.
People. I mean, it's no. I'm not making any sage observation by saying that we are able to process graphic violence more than graphic sex. Yeah. And I think I don't want to say, this would have worked better if it had been released 10 years later, but I do think that more people would have gotten and appreciated at the time what Verhoeven was trying to do. And what he was trying to do was, isn't it ridiculous the way these men are reacting to this? And it really is. But, at the time, people were like, of course they're reacting that way to it. This is horrible.
They react to the presence of cocaine in a crime scene.
Oh my God.
Like they've never fucking seen it.
They cannot get over that she just, slept with this guy for funsies, that they, all they did together was snort coke and fuck. And it's like, my God.
In San Francisco in 1992, when that was half the population of the city was doing.
In San Francisco. How are you investigating crime scenes at San Francisco in the 80s and 90s and there wasn't cocaine involved in some way? And
then you have the element to it that the film is operating in a time that is different than what we're operating in now, in the sense that unencumbered sex was dangerous because you're in the middle of an AIDS crisis. This is before PrEP. The push for people to use condoms in sex was newish. So when this is happening and no one ever mentions a condom at a given point, people are just, how are you propagating this idea? Like as if anything else in this movie is in any way, shape, or form realistic. Again, it's tied to a time it can't control.
It's kind of crazy that there was this much uproar over all the sex in the movie when, like, really all you saw was boobies. It was a lot of boobies, but it was really just boobies.
Like I said, when I watched that, it was less than a decade later. I was like, that's it. You know, it's just a lot of bouncing around, you know?
Yeah,
it's like
a lot of bouncy boobies.
Yeah, it's a lot of, you know, woman on top sex. And it's like, okay, I guess this is blowing people's minds. You know?
Once she has sex with Nick once, which is not that interesting. I mean, she says it herself, but, you know, the rest of the sex that they have is so boring.
No. It was the fuck of the century. Don't forget.
And the thing I love about that is that he thinks that because it was the fuck of the century for him, that it was the fuck of the century for her.
Of course.
I mean, and talk about narcissism and also just, you know, male stupidity, right? Which is like, if it was good for me, like that's what matters. It must have been good for her, you know?
Well, yeah. And of course, because probably not so much now, but certainly back then, I think one of the reasons that men were so threatened by the idea of bisexual women is the idea that a woman could be better at this than I could be. And you know, that idea is just eaten away at Nick. You know, they weren't going to quite go there yet, but I feel it's unspoken that, you know, he's going to make her forget about Roxy and every other woman she slept with. Because, you know, he's got to show her that, you know, the only acceptable way to do this and to have an orgasm is if a man gives it to you. And he's probably very bad at that.
He's stunned when she doesn't immediately agree with him. He's worried when he realizes that Roz has been watching them have sex. And she goes, what, do you want her to join next time? And he can't even respond to that. You're going to introduce someone else into this? You've only tied up my hands. I think Joe Eszterhas's idea of kink is essentially anything more than a Playboy centerfold.
Listen,
anything other than missionary.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's great. Like he is repulsed by this stuff.
Yeah, I was looking at the, you know, the silk scarf and the metal bed frame, and I was like, that's uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. I'm like,
wow.
You could lose circulation in your hands. And like, I mean, it just like, and you know, no aftercare, no safe word.
And also apologize to your neighbors the next day because they're hearing that shit.
Yeah.
They're hearing that squeaking. They're hearing that thumping. But to go back to Joe Eszterhas and his, like, you know, very repressed, regressive attitude towards female sexuality. Remember, and I'm going to go back to Jade again, that the only explanation for this female character in Jade, for that she actually enjoys participating in anal sex, is that she is suffering from hysterical blindness. That she goes into a fugue state and evidently does not know what she's doing when she engages in a sexual activity that has, you know, a lot of, you know, things available to make it enjoyable. That, you know, that is how, you know, horrifying and weird that this sexual act she enjoys doing. She has to black out in order to do it. That's the only reasonable explanation. It's like, Joe, baby, people enjoy doing this. I gotta tell you.
Can I use that excuse sometime, though?
This is a thing, Joe.
I think that Verhoeven thought that the audience would get how ridiculous the prudishness was of the screenplay and see how ridiculous Eszterhas's vision was.
That's what I'm saying.
And
that
he completely underestimated how prudish the general American public was going to be.
He thought people were going to think it's funny the way these men are reacting to her flashing them and being aware that they can see her. And no, it's just like, my God, this scene, like, can you believe the audacity of her to come in and do this? Yeah, it's fucking hilarious. You imagine how ridiculous it would be if, like, you know, a man comes in and, like, his balls are hanging out of his shorts, it's ridiculous that she, you know, knowingly shows up without any underwear on for this interview.
Do I have a theory about that? I don't know that she prepares for this by not going in underwear, just because I don't think she shows up anywhere with underwear on. That being said, when she sees the video camera pointed directly at her, I think her goal is to make that video not worth anything, because she doesn't flash strictly at Nick, which you would think would be the target. She actually flashes straight forward towards the camera, which is why I believe Verhoeven was so adamant that it happened. Again, there's a lot of permission structures in the making of this movie that should make us all blanch. And this is one of them, and it should be noted. It's biphobia, should be noted. I would even say it's fat phobia. The prevailing attitude is that all of this is just weird and bad, and it's noted over and over again. Like, who on earth believes that having sex with a 240-pound woman would give them bruising? And George Zuzna hears this. A man who probably never weighed less than 250 at any point in his life. Like, what the fuck are we talking about, people? It's not funny. But they act like it's a joke. And I think Verhoeven just puts everything that's on the page on the screen and is like, you should laugh at this.
Look at this nonsense.
Look at these fucking idiots.
But people took it seriously. This movie is so sexy and it's so subversive, and it's just like, it's a bunch of nonsense.
But I think it is sexy and subversive nonsense too. And I just don't think audiences are clever enough at the time with the way it was marketed and how people talked about it after the fact to actually grasp that. I think there's too many complicating factors that are worthy of discussion that actually make it a bigger deal than what Verhoeven meant the film to be.
If I could bring up a current movie in comparison,
sure.
and I was talking to Megan Elizabeth when you were dealing with your bird problem. Have you seen Patrick Baby Girl yet?
I have not had the opportunity to see Baby Girl.
Baby Girl, it's pretty good. I would say, again, it's overstating a little bit the raw sexuality of it. I mean, it certainly goes a little further than a lot of recent movies made for adults have, but that's still not saying much. But people have been referring to this movie as, quote, an erotic thriller. I will say there's not much thrilling about it. I mean,
right.
it kind of gives the impression that this young man that Nicole Kidman's character has an affair with is going to begin stalking her. And that doesn't really happen. What he does is, because they are in a dominant submissive sexual relationship, he begins trying to push boundaries with her. Like, he shows up at like a family event where her husband is, and again, not being menacing, just there to kind of get a rise out of her, see how she reacts. But I would say it's kind of more a domestic drama that has some decent-ish sex scenes in it. But, I wonder how many people are going to go into this misinterpreting what the movie's about, judging it on what they have been told it's about when it's not actually that. The problem of trying to pigeonhole movies. I mean, yeah, this is definitely, Basic Instinct is definitely an erotic thriller. But again, I think that, who is the hero and who is the villain here is a little more muddled than people went into it originally thinking.
It makes it even more mystifying to me, because we've also covered Fatal Attraction, that Douglas, who understood his assignment within Fatal Attraction, misunderstood it to this degree. Not so much that he ever derails the movie. He was under this impression right up until the point it screens for audiences that he was the hero of the movie. I guess because his character has a gun and a badge. But to me, that's the reason why he isn't. He is a rogue cop. He is getting away with shit he absolutely should not if he did not possess a badge, and it should be taken away from him immediately.
He should be in front of internal affairs.
I also want to say something that's brave. And I want you, if you're not already on the edge of your seat, I would ask you to inch back. Maybe hold on to your socks. Johnny Boz, his music sucks. I said it.
What?
I said what I said, and I meant it.
What's he doing?
I don't know. He doesn't know how buttons work. He just likes pressing them. I think that is the joke there.
Yes. There were I think that was the first of several so badly done jump scares that were just there because otherwise the scene would be boring. Because there was that one, and then there were several occasions where Sharon Stone reaches back into the covers and you're like, is it an ice pick or no? And then she throws herself in passion on top of him with no ice pick. That was clearly just like, wow, the pacing of this scene sucks. Let's throw in something really, really dumb so that we can have a beat of suspense here. That I felt like that's what that was. I honestly felt like that was lazy writing, to be honest. Sorry, Joe.
He should apologize to us, really.
Joe, in his heart of hearts, believes this to be a thrill when in actuality, it's just playing with audience expectations and not giving them what they expect. And I honestly think that is a good half of the movie's power, is not always doing what you expect. I think at this moment in time, we've seen the regurgitations of this, that it's hard to deliver one of these things without falling into the well-worn tropes of it. So, you know, I think with Baby Girl, you're seeing a lot of people expecting it to turn in this direction. And the marketing shows you that it could be that thing without actually ever bringing it to that pot to boil. But that is what audiences have learned to expect. It's almost like it's a slasher movie to a certain degree, in that if you don't deliver certain elements of it, people will be somewhat dissatisfied because it's not hitting the same beats. I want to say for the record that the guy from the mayor's office is a real prig, but also is not incorrect. I don't like this mayor's office, and I don't care how much money Johnny Boz was pumping into the arts center. His music sucks, and he spent a lot of money on cocaine that he could have spent on the local school district, quite frankly.
6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's so hard to make that choice.
The other observation I had watching it this time was that there's a lot of pinter pauses throughout this movie. And if people were paid by sideways glance, they would have earned billions.
Oh, yeah.
Their eyes can never stay straightforward. George is just can't stop looking at Michael Douglas no matter what anyone else says. He's just like, what's he going to think this time?
Yeah. And
it's almost homoerotic.
It is like, you know, hey, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about her? You know,
again, at one point in the movie, he shows up in cowboy gear unexplained. They just have dinner and they never explain why he's wearing cowboy shit and a giant belt buckle. Why did he show up to dinner like this? What else was he doing? Where was he going before this? And what the fuck is he ever going to do afterwards? It's crazy town. Also, beating the lie detector test. Gina, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't that like pivotal to fucking Jagged Edge too?
I believe so. It usually is, like, and for good reason. Because it turns out it's not actually that hard to beat a lie detector test. So,
turns out it's pseudoscience. But that being said,
basically, like you just have to be kind of a good liar. And you know, not start sweating and your heart racing. I mean, you know, anybody can train themselves into not, you know, immediately reacting in a physical nature when you're lying. So, but that always was definitely a thing in like 80s and 90s. It's like they have to be innocent. They got a clean lie detector. Yeah, that doesn't mean shit. That is why they stopped being admissible. They stopped being admissible in criminal cases a very long time ago.
The thing I love about the lie detector test is that the minute before where she offers to do it, and it's like you could tell she's played with these guys, she has taken their measure, and she is bored now. And like she's tapping her hands on her chair and is like, do you want me to? She's like, I just want to do something interesting now. So why don't you just let's stop all this talking, and because I'm bored.
The other thing is, do we know that she caused the accident with her parents and that she murdered that professor in college?
Probably. Like, I mean, certainly.
But did she need $10 million? She's worth $110 million. If you're worth 100, are you going to kill somebody for 10?
Just for the fun of it, sure.
Okay.
I assumed that she got the 100 after.
Why am I applying logic to nonsense characters? who's to say?
Exactly. Nothing. You can't ask, well, why? Because there's no explanation. Nobody acts like real human beings in this movie.
But if I don't do that, Gina, we don't have a podcast. You understand that, right?
I get that, but particularly this movie, like the character motivations are, I don't know, and who gives a shit.
The character motivations are secondary to the plot twists and turns, and so they're never going to make sense because, are we supposed to think that she brought a fake blonde wig to that office building in Oakland to set up Beth? Like, really? Why?
Didn't Beth actually have that fucking blonde wig, though?
Well, she dyed her hair blonde at one point. Did she also have the wig?
Did you see that driver's license photo? That is not dyed blonde hair.
Well,
she's wearing a Dolly Parton fucking wig.
I just thought that was bad art and costume design.
I was under the impression this was bad art and it would not end up on the test.
I do think the thing that's less believable is that she would get her hands so dirty. Because she seems like she's chill, just all that blood and stuff like that. But maybe it's really the juxtaposition.
If you saw it in the movie theater, there's a good portion of what you see now that was not in that theatrical version. It was severely cut for an R rating. Like, you don't see Johnny Boz's dick in the theatrical version. And you're saying, but Patrick, how can I get my hands on the theatrical version of this movie to see an inferior version of it? Well, do you have a VHS player and a videotape of Basic Instinct from 1997? Because that's the only way you're going to see it. What we see now contains dick and that much blood and eye stabbing from the only Rob Bottin, Gina.
Yeah.
That scene with Johnny Boz getting stabbed rules.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great opening, and then it's just like, all right. All downhill from here, baby.
Yeah, in terms of like a gore fest, it really never rises to that occasion again. I don't really see, bullet holes after the fact as being particularly fun horror-wise. In fact, I think the most horrific moment of this entire movie is the moments of Hellraiser that are just playing on the television in the background. And I think it's also the biggest clue as to how I'm supposed to approach this movie, that it is camp, that everyone is secretly kind of a murderer in it throughout, because that's what Hellraiser is.
These are all bad people. And I think Eszterhas came out and says, well, only the women are bad.
Yeah. He failed.
The men are bad. The men are bad because the women drive them to it.
He failed.
Well, that's what narcissists do. They think it's somebody else's fault, right? And it's not theirs. So we could argue that Eszterhas is the narcissist, unknowingly writing a movie about a bunch of narcissists, but only admitting that the women are the narcissists.
You got a point.
In a way, he believes he's Catherine when he's really Nick. Yeah. But he's really all of them. And he's a very confused individual.
And he's just as dumb as all of them, apparently.
Perhaps the dumbest person possible. I mean, I think that is the primary reason why we end up with Showgirls is Verhoeven goes, here's a guy who does not understand his own power. And they'll pay me money to make a movie that he's written, so why not do it? And he just doesn't realize that people haven't gotten the joke by the time that Showgirls comes out. Because no one on Earth can have sex like that in a pool. That's science fiction. That might as well be fucking flying cars in that movie.
Elizabeth and I actually saw Showgirls in the theaters together, like the night that it came out. Was it opening night, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Yeah, opening night. We saw
Friday
it together.
night. We were so excited to see it. It was so bad. We walked out like, is it so bad that it went around the horn? Like, it's like what happened? What just happened?
Yes. And I think, again, it has that weird revenge element to it. And I don't know.
It was coasting on the fumes of Basic Instinct, because this Basic Instinct was 92, I believe.
Yes.
And Showgirls was 94. And this was, this was a point where Basic Instinct was so successful that Joe Eszterhas, would say, I have this script here, and Hollywood would be, how much can we pay you for it? And then Showgirls was such a disaster but even still, he was like, this is a movie about redemption and it's kind of almost religious and it seems to me and it's Joe.
No.
You have a grown male character who is repulsed by the idea of a woman having a period. And like, I'm not sure the audience isn't supposed to be repelled by it.
What a motion picture. Is there anything that we haven't gotten to yet, Megan and Elizabeth, that you have to have this is your pulpit moment. You need to get up here and tell us about it. About 1992's Basic Instinct.
I've got something.
Okay.
This is the movie that I want to see, which is a prequel movie, Berkeley, 1980. So Catherine has killed her parents and goes to school and tells the sob story, right? Like, I'm the poor little rich girl who lost her parents, blah, blah, blah. And the whole thing about her meeting Beth, and you can actually kind of work it around for a little bit to see who's actually more obsessed with whom, and then actually pursue also at the same time, like what actually happened with the psych professor / counselor. I would love to see that movie.
Well, as soon as Joe Eszterhas is dead, we'll be able to do that. But until that point, he owns these characters, and I doubt if anything will be able to happen because no one wants to pay him a dime.
Is he even still?
He ruined that.
I was gonna say, is he still alive?
As far as I can tell, he's still alive. There's no end date on his
All I
Wikipedia.
remember is reading somewhere while doing research for an article I'd written about another one of his movies. Apparently, he embraced Catholicism at some point, which I am utterly unsurprised because his attitude towards sexuality is extremely Catholic.
Yes.
We only do it in the dark, and we don't do it that way.
Only through a hole in the sheets.
Yeah, you better believe that man. Only that man is on top. Because why would you put a woman on top? That's what whores do.
Oh God! What is this podcast become?
It's a podcast for whores.
Well, t-shirt idea number 2. Last week was Plague Was My Love Language. This podcast is for whores. Might sell.
Ethically slutty podcast. We love
Shout out to
sluts.
Dossie Easton.
We love bisexuals.
We do. We love you all. And you have the right to better movies than Basic Instinct, but I think we all have the right to enjoy the pure comedy that Basic Instinct is.
I want to see more movies where slutty bisexuals go on murder rampages. I think that's great.
Yeah.
If you support a woman's rights, you should support her wrongs too. And if that means some ice pick stabbing, so be it.
Amen.
I would see this movie again if Catherine and Roxy got to ride off into the sunset together.
Yes.
That is a sequence in this movie that I find fucking outrageous. That he walks away from that not in handcuffs. He is not an active duty police officer. He does not have a badge or a gun. And he just runs this motherfucker off the road. And everyone's like yelling at him like, you're above the law. Well, put him in jail. Then he would be not above the law. When you allow him to just fucking walk away from this, you're part of the problem.
He should have been in jail before the beginning of the movie. I'm sorry. If you are undercover vice and you are looking for drug trafficking, and first of all, how hard it is to determine a serious drug trafficker from a tourist to San Francisco.
From a tourist in San Francisco.
It's so unbelievable and stupid. It's either he's lying through his teeth or he's incredibly stupid or both.
And he was coked out when he did it, which again makes everybody's shock at Catherine's casual coke use even more ridiculous.
They don't pay attention to the words other people say, and they certainly don't pay attention to the words they say. It's an entire movie where people just operate in their own weird bubble, and nothing they say or do affects anyone else, unless they have an ice pick in their hand. And that's about the only time it works. It is mystifying that it was as big as it was, but there are elements that are so well done that I understand its effect. It's a contradiction, but I hate to tell everyone, we live in that constantly. It's not new, and I'm sad to say I don't think it's going away.
No.
That brings us to Choose Your Own Deathventure, and that is where we decide of the deaths portrayed in this film, if you were forced to die in one of those ways, which one would it be and why? You could be stabbed multiple times in bed with an ice pick, and that happens a couple of times. You could be shot in the head with a 38 and then have a police captain say, give me your gun, and it's a fucking 44, and no one like goes, well, it's not that gun, so that's not the murder weapon. They literally stand around and go, it's a 38 revolver. And he goes, here's my 44 automatic. I don't know shit about guns, but this is a real fucking thing. And everyone's like, you're on notice for maybe killing this guy. Are you kidding me? Why would it be that gun when you know it's a gun?
Again, the dumbest cops ever, right? I mean, we have to remember.
Oh, they're all fucking
it's
idiots.
Like they just got out of the police academy yesterday.
I would argue that the cops from Police Academy are better cops than these cops.
There's no argument there.
No, I think you're 100% right.
You can die in a car crash caused by Nick. Let's put that out there. He absolutely runs this woman off the road. Now, granted, she starts the whole I want to murder you with a car business. That being said, he finishes it, and he finishes it off a 5 fucking story drop. You could be murdered in a park by Razor. You can be stabbed multiple times in an elevator with another ice pick, or you can be shot by 44 when you're reaching for your keys. Once again, by Nick.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. His body count is higher than his on-screen body count is higher than any other characters in this.
On screen, he murders the most people in this movie. You can't lay the blame of Catherine's former boxer boyfriend dying in the ring. She was attracted to a guy who might die, and he went out and punched people to almost death. And the fact that he did die is not that surprising. So I don't think we can lay that one at her. But so far, as far as like murders we can actually tie to her, there are 3. And then there are a bunch of other murders, and Nick has the most of them.
I think his on-screen kills, I see that as the, kind of, you start off in this seedy situation, and then a lot of times at the end of movies, you want to have a bow, right? So normal society is now back to where it is, and there isn't any more threats. And I think Beth and Roxy's sexuality are both threatening to society in this movie. I think that there's this subtle justification that, Nick is kind of taking out the 2 most obviously threatening people. He would take Catherine out, but the good thing about that is that he doesn't have the opportunity to. She's too smart. I think for some people, those deaths are justified.
Yes. No, it's
100%.
On-screen homophobia is actually happening here. But I think that is like Verhoeven's idea that you're seeing the hero, everybody, doing this for these reasons, and that flew over a lot of people's heads. So when it comes to choosing your own death venture, Elizabeth, I choose you to go first.
Okay. All right. I would choose Johnny Boz's death. As gross and disgusting as it is, even though it's got ice pick, it also has Sharon Stone and cocaine. Yeah, I feel like that's worth it.
The last thing that goes through his mind is orgasm, ice pick, in that order. So, there are rougher ways to go about it. Megan, how about you?
Oh, I think I'm going to choose bullet to the head. It just seems like the quickest, most painless one.
No. You're absolutely right. We often choose the quickest deaths. It's a perfectly rational answer. Gina, what say you?
I'm going to take Johnny Boz's death because I don't mind the idea of having an orgasm immediately before death. I mean, they do call it the little death. And, normally that doesn't involve, an ice pick through your eye, but still, I'm not going to yuck anybody's yums. And, and also I cannot sing or play a musical instrument. So I figure that makes me and Johnny Boz about even.
Now, how do you feel about being surrounded by the dumbest fucking people in San Francisco, just like shining blue lights on you, on your corpse?
I mean, I kind of like the idea of people just being shocked and appalled by every aspect of my personal life in the event of my demise.
I'm also going to choose this one primarily because I want the mayor's office involved after I die. It's a big dream. And I don't think I'm going to achieve it in this life. Why not wish for it in another. That's my philosophy. Before we go, Elizabeth and Megan, why don't you tell our audience a little more about our show? Tell us about our show. Tell the audience about your show.
It's Kill by Kill. And
okay. I like it already.
Focus on the deaths and the characters. Oh, sorry.
Sounds dumb if you ask me.
I know. There's no way that's going to last. I'll tell you that right now.
So Megan and I are both mental health professionals and cousins who also grew up in toxic homes filled with narcissistic abuse. And so we thought that we would put our brains together and our very dark sense of humor and talk about that and tell some of the ugly truths and also, do a little bit of educating and then also talk about like some tools that work. So yeah,
there's really nothing funnier than child abuse. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's a laugh.
It's up there at the top for sure.
And Megan, will you tell them about the crazy mama?
Oh, yes. Okay. So I started this as a drinking game years ago where when I would meet someone and find out that they also had a crazy mom or a crazy dad, we would go out to a bar and we'd just tell like increasingly horrible stories to each other about events that happened in our childhood. And the rule was that you had to drink whenever somebody said something that made you feel like you wanted a drink. So we ended up drunk pretty quickly. And so we adapted that for the show. And so at the end of every episode, Elizabeth and I tell stories to each other of horrible things that our mothers did when we were kids. And we decide who's the winner, who wins the title of worst experience.
I don't want to, come up all the bully in the playground, but I think I could probably beat you guys. So
challenge accepted.
If you ever have me on your show, I had the story immediately popped into my mind. So
bring it on. Bring it on.
Not me, my mother's a saint. But let me tell you a couple of stories offline though.
So yeah, it's, we really wanted to make the podcast for, what we needed when we were first figuring this out, because it is such a mind fuck to grow up in a family like this. So we really just wanted to at least take what happened to us and make something good out of it. So we covered different topics like gaslighting and all sorts of other fun stuff like that. And we did do a movie episode because we both grew up in LA and so movies are really close to our heart. And so we just did an episode on Lost Boys and specifically why that sort of bad boy vampire character is so attractive to people that grew up in these kind of families.
Mullets?
Yes, that's exactly it.
And I just realized in therapy that one of the reasons why I really love horror movies is because I know when the horror starts and I know when the horror ends.
Yeah, that is explaining a lot. And Gina, where can people find you on these here internets?
I write about movies and television and pop culture at my Substack, GinaWatchesThings.substack.com. And I am fairly active on Blue Sky under Gina Does Things.
Do it today, people. Check it out. Join us over on Patreon where we have special bonus episodes for you. We have Q&As and bonus episodes and movie commentaries galore. We're on the various socials with the exception of Twitter. Fuck that place. And we might be fucking off more if this keeps up. Who's to say? We're definitely on Blue Sky for the foreseeable future. And you please subscribe to us on YouTube. You don't have to listen to us on YouTube, but if you have an account, just hit subscribe for funzos. And that just about does it. But don't worry, folks. The erotic body count will continue this month for myself, for Gina, Megan, and Elizabeth. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.